You're listening to the Full Court Press with your host, Drew Duncan. Don't you dare touch that dial. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Full Court Press. I am your host, Drew Duncan. You guys are checking me out live from the K-Sun Studios out here in Wichita, Kansas. You know the rap sheet. I am on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, all at Drew Duncan 83. Brent Merceberger is one of the greatest announcers of all time. He really is. I loved listening to that dude growing up as a kid, especially when him and Kirk Herbstreit, can I do my job this morning? Took over the Saturday night games. I mean, they had really great chemistry, and Brent's voice, very distinctive and so distinguishable. Any moment you hear it, you know exactly who it is, and there's never any question about who you're listening to. As much as I love Brent, and as good as I think he still is, I don't know that he should be taking shots at Tony Romo. I feel like Romo is just an easy target. You know, Brent saying that he's cutting off his colleague. And I don't know. I've listened to Tony Romo, and a lot of it had to do with after the Cincinnati game. Some people were saying that he was really just kind of getting after Andy Dalton. They felt like he was being disparaging. First of all, who the hell has taken more criticism than Tony Romo? I mean, are we just mad at everything that Tony Romo does? Like, okay, Tony Romo did good and that was cute. And oh, no. Now we're going to start poking holes in everything that he's doing. What? Okay, so the first 2 weeks, everybody's like, Tony Romo is like this amazing magician and he could just predict the future and I need him to help me with my lottery tickets. And now all of a sudden it's, man, he really went after Andy Dalton. I didn't hear where he really went after Andy Dalton. I see a guy who's still not far enough removed from the game that sometimes he's maybe a little too into it. But other than that, there was that pass play, for instance, right? It's a little drag route. Guy's coming underneath, and, Romo's like, he's open. He never got it to him. And afterwards, he was like, you got to step back. And he said, that's going to be one of those where Andy wakes up tomorrow morning and he watches the film and he's going to go, oh, my gosh. What did Tony say so bad? Isn't that what a sports broadcaster is supposed to do, is point out everything that's happening? That's why they started hiring guys who were former athletes in the first place, because former athletes got tired of guys who had never played or hadn't played since high school or whatever the case may be talking about them. So what do they say? They say, well, okay, great. We'll start giving you guys spots in the booth. And how many people like listening to Phil Simms, right? Like all the criticism about Phil Simms being boring, being Captain Obvious. See, just because you used to play the game, that doesn't make you a good broadcaster. And Tony Romo's one of the few that when I listen to him, I'm like, well, at least he's into what's going on. And when somebody asks him a question, he doesn't go, yeah, I mean, he really has. Hey, Tony, Brett Favre had a really good career. I mean, yeah, he really did. And the thing about a guy like a Brett Favre is that he's Brett Favre. Oh, thanks for the feedback there, Tony. At least he's not doing stuff like that. I hate that generic stuff. And we just, now, and maybe there are times when Tony's a little too engaging. But from what I've seen, there's pretty good chemistry. And I don't understand why we feel the need to knock Tony Romo, why Brent went after him. And one of the things that Musburger said was the further you get away from the game, the less personnel you're going to know. So what he's trying to point out there is that one day Tony Romo's not going to know all the guys on the field the way that he does now because he's played against a good majority of them, right? But when he was asked, Tony, what made you see that there? He said, well, I played 14 seasons in the NFL. So just because he's going to be in a booth for the rest of his life and won't play another game of football in the NFL, most likely, that suddenly means that he'll be so far removed from the game that he won't know the personnel, and because he won't know the personnel, that he won't be a good announcer anymore and he won't be able to pick up on things like that? Great. Let's fire Kirk Herbstreit then, because he's been 20-plus years removed from the game of football, and that guy has no idea who the hell's on the field. Or does he do research? Or does he talk to coaches about new schemes and game planning? I wonder how the hell that works out. I don't understand why Brent, are you mad, bro? Are you jealous that he's getting so much attention? I don't understand. I get it. Tony Romo's not the show. And him being a play-by-play guy, usually the play-by-play guy is seen as the guy, right? That's the dude with the talent. Brad Nessler, Brent Musburger, okay, so on and so on. There's, Sean McDonough. There's 1,000,001 guys that I could talk about. The play-by-play guys, because what do they get? They're the ones who get to announce when the touchdown initially happens. They're the ones who get to announce when the big interceptions happen. I mean, they get, the good end of it. So what, the play-by-play guy is doing something that people are taking notice to and you don't like it? I think people are tired of listening to basic commentary. With all the stuff that's going on right now with football, the last thing that we need is boring commentators. Somebody who actually gets in there and engages, and it sounds like he did his homework before he showed up. How many people get mad in this business, maybe this is boring radio, I don't know, because I'm talking a lot of business stuff here, but how many people get upset when somebody just shows up 5 minutes before their job and is just like, well, I'm the talent, I'm here. I don't need to help the camera guy out. I don't need to do any research. We don't need to talk about questions beforehand or afterwards or things that we need to point out during the game that will make it, a little bit better for us. And no. I just need to show up, clock in, clock out, and go home. That's it. We all know that guy at work. That guy who just shows up, doesn't talk to anybody, doesn't give a damn about anybody, thinks he's the best that's ever done what he's done, and nobody likes him, and he's too egotistical, and when he's done and out of there, he huffs it, never wants to work overtime, doesn't want to help cover anybody's shifts no matter what's going on. We know that guy. There's plenty of those guys in sports journalism too, believe it or not. And for anybody to think that we just get to show up 5 minutes before our shift starts, you got another thing coming. My show doesn't start till 8. I'm usually in here at 7 a.m. Sometimes earlier. It just depends. Reviewing notes. Is there anything I missed overnight? Is there something new that I could talk about? Maybe I don't want to talk about this and I'll replace it with something else. All those things go into what I do. And for anybody to just sit back and go, Tony Romo knows all the personnel, well, I love you, Brent, but I don't agree with that. Just because you don't play with a guy doesn't mean that you don't know a tendency. Think about it like this. Donovan McNabb was talking about during his first sports broadcast when he was on Fox, or he was asked, what's the biggest difference? He said, well, from up here, I could finally see a lot of the things that Coach was talking about. You don't think that from up there, Tony Romo's not looking down and going, man, look at all the things I missed, and now I know what Coach was talking about. That's a part of it. That's the thing. When you're on the field, sometimes you just don't listen to Coach because you're going, dude, I'm the one that's on the field. I know what I'm seeing out there. I know what the hell is going on. Stop trying to tell me something. Everybody at some point during their careers had that mentality. Everybody. I don't care who you are, how much of a coach's guy you are. At some point, you thought to yourself, I know what I'm doing. Coach just needs to stick it. Well, suddenly you're up there in that booth, and you're looking down, and you're going, oh, yeah, And I feel like Tony Romo's been a target his entire career. In the NFL, everybody was so quick to judge him. The only thing anybody could ever point out was all the bad stuff that he did. That was it. Nobody ever talked about the good. Nobody talked about his amazing completion percentage that was better than 70%. Nobody ever pointed that out. Nobody ever talked about his passing yards, his mobility, how breaking his back for that team literally ended up basically costing him his career. I feel like after a certain point, we just need to let a guy be a guy. Tony's doing his thing. He's up there in that booth with another commentator who's been doing this for a very long time. I'm sure if there's any issues with anything that's going on, they will discuss it behind closed doors. It's not for everybody else to, start jumping the gun and, to hell with Tony Romo. I like listening to Tony Romo because I love learning the intricacies about the game of football. That's why I love listening to John Gruden, because I love the intricacies in the game of football. I love knowing the terminology. I love knowing what I'm looking at before it happens. I love understanding formations, what they're trying to do. It's the game of chess that has always interested me about the game of football. It's the mental game, the physical game. I can outthink you. I know what you're going to do before you do it. That's one of the very good parts about all sports to me, is the constant give and take and attack mode. I just love that aspect to it. And Tony Romo and John Gruden and some of these other guys are doing a really good job at revealing those parts of the game to us. I remember Simon Cowell one time during American Idol. He goes, I think we've educated people on what good music sounds like now. Basically what he was saying is, beforehand, you guys were voting for some people that I will never understand how they made it as far as they did. But now I've seen a change, and Americans have now gravitated towards this, and they understand what actual talent really is. You see, it's not always just about that it factor. This person is just something about them. I get tired of that. There's something about them. Dude, you either do or you don't. I don't know what to tell you. It's okay in some cases, but to say that all the time about somebody, Tony Romo doesn't have an it factor. Tony Romo has 14 years of game experience that he's excited to bring to the booth. He can't wait to impart his knowledge to everybody. And I personally don't have an issue with it. And if Brent does, then, that is what it is, bro. I'm sure that if his, colleague does, it'll come out of the woodwork eventually. As far as it being too hard on Andy Dalton goes, I didn't see anything that was so over the top that made me go, man, Tony's being kind of a jerk. Especially with the kind of things that were said about Tony Romo over his career by analysts, by fans, live broadcasters. Come on. If anybody's got the right to say something that paid his dues, it's Tony Romo. The way everybody flew after that guy, there was no hesitation. Anytime he made a mistake, Tony got ate alive for it, man. A part of me, I guess, feels bad for him because he can't do anything. He can't do anything without somebody jumping on top of him. Just amazing. Poor Tony, man. One of the best players ever to not be able to get a Super Bowl ring. And I don't even think he'll go down like that. Dan Marino will and has. But it doesn't look like Tony's going to get that distinction, even though he should. He is one of the greatest quarterbacks ever played the game. And right now, he's clearly making a mark as one of the better announcers in the game of football. This is the Full Court Press. I am your host, Drew Duncan. You guys are checking me out live from the K-Sun Studios out here in Wichita, Kansas. I am on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, all at Drew Duncan 83. You can get my DMs, you can hit my comment section, and get your comments read live over the air. We're going to take a quick sponsored break. There's a lot more to get to. Dwayne Wade to the Cleveland Cavaliers. We'll be back right after this. Don't you dare touch that dial.